Hi, I'm Scott Davenport. In this video, we're going to do a more advanced workflow in ON1 Photo RAW. Our masking is going to be more detailed, more elaborate. We'll use some of the advanced tools of masking that Photo RAW has to offer. And we'll also get a little more creative with a couple of the filters to change the mood of this overall photo. I have this photo loaded in Develop, and what I want to do is I want to bring these lifeguard towers out more. I want to make them more detailed, make them jump out. I also want to enrich the tones in the sky, make those bluer. Now, a challenge with this photo is that there's a lot of blue tones in the scene, so we have to be very particular about some of the masking to separate the towers from the sky. Let's start with our basics, and the first thing we'll do is the crop tool so that we can level that horizon. I'll grab that level tool and just take it right across that horizon line that's hiding out there. And let's position the frame so that we're not crowding that tower number 22 over there in the corner too much. That looks good. We'll go ahead and press apply. Basic adjustments will be very simple. The exposure is pretty good. I do want to increase the whites up, so the white point will get a little brighter here. Somewhere around 25 looks good. I don't want to blow out the sky, but I do want to open things up. I also want to make sure we get a nice deep black point. There's a small gap at the left edge of the histogram. We can close that in with the blacks. And as I adjust that, I can press and hold the J key and I can watch for clipping. You see all that clipping that comes in, that blue overlay on the photo? Pressing and holding the J key while I work this slider to get a good point. That's the only basic adjustments I'm going to make for this photo. Everything else we're going to do with effects or local adjustments to target the lifeguard towers, separate those from the sky, and change the overall mood of this scene. Well, let's move over into effects and start with color. Let's target the sky to begin with. We'll add a color enhancer, and there is a nice style here called sky. And that's really enriching the blues. That's actually really too strong for this scene. So I'm going to begin with the opacity slider. Take that all the way down to 0 and start to nudge it up. And I'm watching what's going on in the sky. And I'm happy with about there. That looks good. Now, I don't like what's going on with the increase in blue tones in the sand and in the towers themselves. This is where we're going to use our first masking tools to target just the sky. So first I'll open up the masking area. I'm going to click the invert button. This has removed the color effect entirely from the scene. And now I want to paint it into just the sky. I'll grab the masking brush and turn on the perfect brush. And in this gear menu, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm making sure my color threshold is very low. And the transition is also a lower number. Defaults are usually somewhere like this. And I want to make them very tight because there are a lot of different blue tones, and I want to make sure we target very specific blue tones, the ones that I select. From here, make my brush big. I'll choose Paint In, and then start to paint in this effect around the tower. And I will turn on our mask overlay. We can see that the edge detection is working very well. I'm going to switch our mask view to red and turn that on so we can visually see what's going on here. And as I click in between these bars, I'm going to work my way through all of these areas and make sure I only target the sky. And that low threshold, you'll even notice as that was a mistake. Let's fix that one. As we get into the sky itself, you can see it gets very, very targeted. The subtle differences in blue tones in the sky even require additional clicks to mask the color enhancement into those areas. And that's okay. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to work through all of these areas, but the result in the end is going to be worth it. Now, in the interest of making the video easier to watch, I'm going to speed this section up so you don't have to watch me paint through an entire sky here by the slow number of clicks. Now, once I have the main areas around the edges of the objects I want to make sure are outside of the mask, I can turn off the perfect brush, make the mask much larger, and then the masking becomes a lot faster and more fluid because the masking tools aren't having to sample color tones and check to see if an edge has been encountered. So that's a good technique to use when you're masking an area like this. Target your edges first, and then once you've gotten your edge work done, you can turn off your perfect brush and clean up the rest. And I got a couple of minor pieces of cleanup to do in here. We'll take care of those with a couple of clicks. And that's looking pretty nice. The final bits of cleanup. That looks like we are set. All right. Now I expect that this mask will be very useful for another filter in the session here. So I'm going to copy that mask and keep that up on the clipboard so we can use it for other adjustments. Let's turn off our mask view. You can do that with this button here. You can also do it with the view button here. Now let's add some punch to the towers. Let's add dynamic contrast. And we can see the towers are already starting to jump out really nicely. We're going to adjust the sliders here a bit, and I'm paying attention to what's going on with the lifeguard towers. So we'll increase the small details, the medium details, and the larger details. And just to really have mainly tower number 19 here really jump out. Now this is adding this contrast everywhere, and that's not what I want. I want to keep that sky soft. Well, I can reuse the mask that we had. So I'll go into the masking area. I will paste the mask. Now the mask here is applying the contrast to the sky and removing it from the towers, the exact opposite of what I want. So I'll click the invert button, and now the towers are getting that pop where the sky is remaining soft and fluid and smooth. The next adjustment is going to be to reduce the bluish cast that's in the towers. I'm going to do that with a black and white filter. Now I don't want to make this whole photo black and white, but I'm going to use the black and white tools to help me reduce the saturation overall, but doing it kind of in a more interesting way, and just a straight, desaturation. So the very first thing I'll do is I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer to about half. And so this is now partially desaturated, partially black and white. And now I'll click the auto button in the color response just to get a baseline mix from ON1 to see what it decides. And I'll start adjusting these sliders, paying attention to what's going on with the towers. And I'll just fiddle around with each one of them to see what the impacts are. Not seeing much with the reds. Mainly, it's mostly in those, more in the yellows there. The yellows I expect to see in the 22, the 10, the 23, all these sidebars here on all of the different towers there. We'll take that and make it right around there. Looks pretty good. Greens and aquas should really have very little effect. There was not much of that at all in the scene. Aquas to a degree. Bring the aquas up very high. That's brightening it up some. The blues will play around with darkening some of those. Again, I'm paying attention to the tower. I know the sky is getting very dark, but we're going to use a mask to target the towers again. And if you haven't figured it out, we're going to use that same mask again that we had before. So that's looking pretty cool. Let's go ahead and apply that mask. We'll paste that same mask down. Do the same trick we did before, invert it. And so now, as I adjust this black and white opacity, you can see the towers get completely black and white. There's nothing at all. And I do like that mix of somewhere around 50% looks pretty cool. Now, any other adjustments we make in black and white are only targeting the towers at this point because we have this mask applied. Let's take a look at, first off, film grain. I don't want to add grain, so we'll go up to the top here and say none. And then what about the tone? What can we do with tone? We have a lot of different tone controls, and we're being very selective because we're only applying these to the towers. Let's bump up contrast a little bit on the towers themselves. If I push it really far, you'll see the dramatic change. That's too strong, somewhere in that area. We can also even increase the shadows, open those shadows up a little bit. Again, I'll push it very far so you can see the impact. Something around there is nice too. Let's also visit the detail slider and see what that does for us. Inching that up, I'm starting to see a little more of the grit and the grain there in this tower as well. So I'm gonna add that in. I like that. Let's do one more adjustment to see about bringing out a little bit of the hints of motion in the sky. Let's go to the Local Adjustments tab, and we'll start with the Detail style here. That's basically bumping up structure. And we'll open up the masking area, and we'll use a color range mask. So we'll use the eyedropper, and we'll pick one of these blue tones here. Now we can see that some of these streaks are showing up, but there's adding a lot of detail elsewhere. It creates a very, very intricate mask. If we hit the view button, we can see that this is what the mask has selected for us. And as we adjust the color range, we can tighten this up. And so we will not affect any of the areas with the red overlay. And we will have some impact on the sky up in here. And this area is what we're most interested in. That's where we have those little motion streaks from this long exposure. Let's turn off the view there. And so here's those hints of lines we have now. Let's see before and after. Before and after. Now it's adding some extra punch to the tower itself, which I don't want to have that. So we have our brush selected. I can switch it to paint out. I don't need the perfect brush for this. And we'll just sweep over the lifeguard towers because we've already added sufficient detail to those in other tools and other filters. And so let's just have this local adjustment detail focusing on those hints of motion in the sky. There, that's much better. A final adjustment will be a vignette. I'll go back into the overall settings for effects, add a vignette, and I'll choose the strong style and back off that strength quite a bit. That's too strong, I think. Around there looks pretty good. And one final touch I'll do is use this centering tool, these crosshairs, and click and drag the center of that vignette up. As I move it around, you can see that the spotlight of the vignette changes. So if I bias it just a little bit higher so that it's drawing the eye upward, this is getting a little darker, this opens up, and we're targeting our viewer to see Tower 19 and kind of this little bit of drama and glow happening behind the scenes there. So our final changes, here's before and here's after. That is just a sample of what you can do in Photo RAW with some of these more advanced masking tools. In this video, we saw the perfect brush and we saw color range masks. There's also luminosity masks as well as blending modes and blending options to really target shadows, low midtones, high midtones, highlights, really any zone in the zone system with any filter that you can do masking with. I've got an entire video course, 5+ hours of video instruction that talks all about this stuff called Mastering Light and Shadow. So if you want to go deep, go ahead and check that out.